This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so Parsha Chayei Sarah in the Stone Chumash, page 106, regular Bible, Genesis 23:1, and we often point out the name of this Parsha, the name of this weekly Torah portion is Chayei Sarah, which means the life of Sarah. But what happens in the very second verse is we learn Vayu Chayei Sarah, the years of the life of Sarah were 100 years, 20 years, 7 years, the years of the life of Sarah. A little bit redundant. We'll touch that in a moment. Vatamat Sarah, and Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, Hebron, in the land of Canaan, in Kiryat Arba in the land of Canaan, Hebron in the land of Canaan, presently known as the land of Israel. And Avram came to eulogize Sarah, Lispod Sarah, Viliv Kota, and to cry over her death. So right away, we pointed out before, there are two parshiot, there are two weekly Torah readings that have the word chai, that have the word life in their title. That is Chayei Sarah, this week's parsha, the life of Sarah, and in the second verse, she passes away, and also the last parsha in Bereshit, in Genesis, is Vayechi, and that is, and Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt for those 17 years, and then we hear about the death of Jacob. So it's sort of paradoxical that the two parshiot, which have the word life in their name, actually deal with imminent passings. And Rabbi Sachs points out I think he one points it out very beautifully, that the Hebrew word for life is chayim. Now, chayim with the yud mem at the end makes it plural. So the very Hebrew word for life has this plurality to it. It is not life, but it is lives, because our understanding is that we each have our physical life that we have during the time that we are here on this earth. And then after that, we cross what we refer to as the Gesher HaChayim, as the bridge of life, and the halachic compendium that we have of Jewish law about death, passing, and all that follows is referred to as Gesher HaChayim. That compendium is titled The Bridge of Life. And that's what we view death as being. Death is a bridge between our physical life and then our return to a simply spiritual existence. And I've mentioned before the book Life After Life by a Dr. Moody, who was a non-Jewish, non-religious person, doctor. But there were all of these near-death experiences that shared all of these commonalities. And he wrote a book about that, and about how a person felt themselves lifting out of their body and observing all the work that the doctors or whatever it was happening with their physical body, watching that from above, and then being sucked back into their body right at the end of this near-death experience. And that's what that's how our sources describe it, and that's what we understand and believe, that we are a physical being and a spiritual being that come together during the extent of our lifetime. And when the physical body dies, then we move on to that second second component of our life. Maybe second is not the right, because that's where we were before we came down here, and that's where we return to. We're returning back there. I was just talking to somebody right before this class, and this person is now going to deal with a close relative that passed away and traveling for the funeral. And he shared, as a person not of Orthodox, but has been coming to a lot of class. We've had a lot of discussions, and how the Jewish understanding of life and that which follows has given him a lot of strength and comfort in dealing with these. Yes, Judy.
Is there terminology in the Amishe Torah that specifically references that idea?
Okay. So do we have this? Oh, hello. Welcome back. Good to see you. Good to see you. Shalom. Good. Please. Yes. So Judy asked, all right, do we have scriptural sources, right, for this? So there are some. Okay. Ramban asks the question, why are there not more? Right? We'll deal, right? So first, yes, a number of ways that this appears. One is that in the very beginning of creation, it said, "Vayitzer Hashem Elokim et Adam." God formed humankind, and there is two yuds in the Vayitzer, right? Which refers to a double forming, to which Rashi brings the medrash that one is for Olam Hazeh, for this world, and the other is for the world to come. Let me find that exact pasuk, show it to you. Now you might say, well, that's not all that clear, Rabbi. That's a little bit of a drash, right? Which is fair. But let me find that. Yeah, that's on page 10, chapter 2, verse 7. Vayitzer Hashem Elokim et Adam, and God formed humankind, Adam, Afar, right? Earth, Afar min Adama, right? Dust from the ground. Vayipech ba'apav, and blew into him Nishmat Chayim, this soul of life. Rashi says, Shtei Yitzirot, Yitzira l'olam hazeh, v'Yitzira l'tchiat hametim. By the animals, there's no double yud. There's a single yud by the forming of the animals. So that is one area. Another one that comes up repeatedly, and that we'll need to look, if we'll look at the very end of our Parsha. Take a look at page 120, and we have it by Avram, but we have it throughout, right? And that is verse 8, Perek Chafhei 25, chapter 25, verse 8, page 120 in our Stone Chumashim. Vayigva vayamat Avraham, and Avraham expired and died b'seva tova, at a good old age, zakein, elderly, v'saveh, and content, mature and content. Then these words, and we had this throughout, when the Torah discusses death, the next words are Vayasef el amav, and he was gathered to his people. What does that mean? He was gathered to his people. You might say, oh, that means burial. The problem is the next verse says, Vayikparu oto, he was buried by Yitzchak and Yishmael, his sons. Isaac and Ishmael, his sons, buried him. So there's two things. There's being gathered to his people, and that precedes the burial. So the gathered to his people is not talking about the body going into a family burial ground. Right? So it's explained to mean gathered to his people means that first, right, there are two components here. There is the body, which needs to be buried. But before that, upon death, the person is gathered to his people. And that is, again, how we describe that Gesher HaChaim, that those who have preceded us to that realm are there to escort us over that Gesher HaChaim, over that bridge of life. And that is what gives a person right? It is a time of confusion, a time of unsurety, and a time of a sense of vulnerability, right? What's happening now? And they are there to escort the person as they cross over that bridge. And it's interesting in this book again by Dr. Moody, right? He writes how those people who have gone through these experiences, that their whole perspective on life and death has changed as a result of that. And it's no longer to them, the great unknown, and they no longer have this fear and trepidation about it, but they have this sense of this serenity and this comfort at that point. Okay, so that is just an aside. Avram then gets up. Amen. Avram then gets up. We're back to page 106. Right? Oh, I'm sorry. I started to say before, Judy, in reference to your question. The Ramban asked, well, why isn't there much more in the Torah about this stage? And he quotes a line that the Gemara, that the Talmud uses, right? If there's a certain case going on, and I say in the court, and I say, yeah, but I've got witnesses in New Zealand. I've got witnesses, but they're in the Amazon rainforest, right? Keep in mind that in the time of the Talmud, if a person's overseas, then there's no way of communicating. We can't just FaceTime them and clarify. There's no means of communicating, and even traveling would take weeks, if not months. So the Gemara says, Eidim Bitzad Istan is the example they give. I got witnesses over there in this faraway place, the Teyaser, right? Is that going to then affect our ruling? We have to rule based on the facts that we have in front of us, the knowledge that we have at our hands, not what's happening over there. So he says that the Torah, right, does not speak about if you do this, then you're going to get that. It's easy to say what you'll get in a place where it can't be verified. So the Torah doesn't go at lengths for that, right? It alludes to by certain mitzvot we mentioned, by honoring parents, right? You'll have longevity, you'll have long days and longevity, and that double term is explained as this world and the next world. Also by Shiluach HaKen, we have that also, that double, this world and the next world. But the Torah does not dwell on that. The Torah, the Bible, dwells on this world. What we're supposed to do here in this world, that which is measurable here in this world, right? And the Torah has a number of things that are very measurable, very, very measurable, surprisingly measurable in this world. For example, we have the mitzvah of Ola Regel, the mitzvah, the commandment of the 3 pilgrimage holidays. Everyone goes up to Jerusalem, right? And the Torah says, and you might ask, what's going to happen with my fields, right? Imagine what we see happen in Israel, in the north and the south, right? If we wouldn't have an army there, we wouldn't have, right? What would happen over there? It'll get overrun. So how can we have this commandment to go? And the Torah says, don't worry, right? No one will come and enter your land. No one will take any of your things. And that's what we did for generations. And whenever we go, there'll be something else going on that our not so often friendly neighbors, right, had what to take care of on their own and didn't come in and pillage and do everything by us. So the Torah deals with this world because that is quantifiable and not that which, yes, eternal damnation or this or that we don't deal with. Yes, Ruti.
I wanted to ask, it says Vayasef Elamah. Is there also for Sarah or for some other woman that says Vayasef Elamah for the woman?
By Sarah, let's see.
I didn't see.
Yeah, I don't think it said it over there.
Or for any other woman?
we don't view there being any difference between males and females when it comes to this, right? Now the Torah doesn't speak much about the death of women, right? You know, as Rivka, Rachel, but Rachel we do hear about. Leah we don't hear about. I need to check. I don't know if it does. But our teaching is that there is no differentiation over there, whether it's male or female passing away. Correct. That's probably who was Amav, right? When Avram passed away, who was there to be there with him and to greet him. Yeah. Actually, the question is asked. He was gathered to his people. 1 second. Who was his father? Terach. And what was Terach? An idolater, right? And they derive from here that Terach did teshuvah. That Terach mended his ways before he died, and therefore Avram was gathered, right? Was gathered to him. Okay. Some other points I want to try to get to today is a lot. Again, these parshiot are filled. So what happens over here? So Avram now is is looking to find a burial place for Sarah, right? The burial place we know is going to be what we call today Marat HaMachpelah, right? Which is Tomb of the Patriarchs, which is there in Hebron, right? And that is where he wanted that specific burial place because he knew that that is where Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve were buried, and ultimately Abraham and Sarah were buried there, Yitzchak, Isaac, and Rivka, Rebecca were buried there, and Yaakov and Leah, Jacob and Leah were buried there. But he wanted this very specific place, and he says, right? And he says to them, he speaks b'nei chet, and he says, Ger v'toshav, verse 4, I am a ger, a foreigner here, and a resident amongst you. Give to me a burial site where I can bury my dead. And they answered, they said, listen to us, you are a prince of God amongst us. You can choose whichever one you want. No one will hold it back. Abraham bows in appreciation, verse 8, and he says, if you will agree, right, to allow me to bury my dead from before me, please make a meeting with myself and Ephron ben Sochar, and let him give to me the Marat HaMachpelah. Here we have it right here, the cave of Machpelah, Asher Lo, which is his, in the edge of his field, the Kesef Malay, for full price, he should give it to me as a burial. Ephron was sitting there. Ephron answers before all those there. We turn to page 108, verse 11. He says, no, my master, listen to me. The field is yours, and the cave that is there, it's all yours. Before everyone, I've given it to you. Avram again bows in appreciation, and he says to Ephron, verse 13, if you listen to me, I want to give the kesef hasadeh. I want to give the money for the field. Take it from me, and I will bury my dead from before me. Ephron answers and says, please, a land of 400 shekel kesef, beini veincha, between me and you. Sounds like the Arab shuk. Come here, my brother. For you I do special. Right, 400 shekel kesef between me and you. What is it? And bury your dead. Avram heard, and he paid to Ephron the 400 shekel kesef. Over lesocher, it had to be crisp new bills. It had to be the best currency. That's what happened over here. So that is what's happening here at the very beginning of our parsha.
So
Now,
how much would the land be now?
I'm sorry?
How much did he really find?
Oh, well, we know now. It's much blood has been spilled over that land. Yeah, a lot more than 400. You know, it's like Years ago, we had our neighbor Betty passed away, a very sweet non-Jewish woman. Was our next door neighbor. So we had her once over Friday night. We were talking, and she had bought her house here, I think, from plans or when it first came up. Right, this is the 1970s. Right, for I think it was like 40 or 50 $1,000. Right, and our first reaction was, you should have bought 2 or 3, right? The only thing is, 50 years from now, people are going to say, "What? You got that house for $2 million? You should have bought 2 or 3." That's just what happens over time. But at the time, it was a lot. What it is now, astronomical. Yes. So again, we mentioned last week how Abraham had all of these different nisyonot. Nisyonot, we discussed, are the challenges in life. And we all have myriad challenges on a daily basis. What do I say? What don't I say? How do I say it? Who do I say it to? What do I look at? What do I not look at? How should I spend my time? Constant. We have that. But these were 10 major life turning point events in Avram's life. And exactly which were these 10 nisyonot, these 10 challenges? There are different opinions. According to most, the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, last week's Parsha, that was the apex, that was the 10th. But there are those that say, Rabbi Yonah says that this was the 10th one. The 10th one was after suffering that intense personal loss of his wife, of his dear wife, a wife for decades and decades. And together they are founding the Jewish nation. After that, in the land that God had promised to him, he's got to deal with this swindler negotiating up and back, right? And we know that after one of the 7 close relatives for whom we become mourners, that Avelut applies. So during the period of Avelut, of mourning, we sit Shiva and we go into a house and we stay in the house. We don't deal with the outside world, because who can deal with all the trivialities of life when we've just experienced such a deep personal loss? And therefore the Shiva house is meant to be this cocoon that goes around us and protects us from all those trivialities. And that's why those who are visiting in a mourner's house, their mitzvah is to go there and be quiet. Shtika. Go there, be quiet. Because you might be curious to know about the person. The mourner might not want to speak about the person. You might want to talk about the Lakers, and they want to talk about the person. You go there and you be quiet and let that person set the direction. And if they don't want to talk, so then just be there. That is your role. Your role is just to be there. And you can't deal with the trivia. I remember when my father, of blessed memory, passed away. I was living in Israel, came back to New York, I was here for the funeral and sat Shiva with all my siblings at a cousin's house who very kindly opened up her house to us, none of us living in New York at the time. And then in the middle of that, we each went back to our respective homes. Natalie had come in with Devora, who was then a little baby, 1.5 years old. And then we were traveling back. And I walk out of the Shiva house and I see someone walking a dog. And my first thought was, who cares about a dog? Who cares about a dog? You just don't want to deal. And then I go to the airport. They start asking, did you pack your bags? Did anybody give you anything? And, all of these things, you just can't deal with it. And you're meant to be protected from all that by the whole process of the Shiva and the Shloshim and the whole year. That's all there to get us back into the groove of life, back into life in this forever changed state after that loss. But we don't move on, but we have to move forward, and it's all to get us able to move forward. And here's Avram, all alone at this point. And he has to deal with this negotiation, this swindling, this bargaining. And Avraham stays cool, calm, collected. Avraham is gracious. Avraham shows appreciation. He bows in appreciation a number of times. This was the greatest challenge of Avram. How when he was going through, some people, well, the Balei Mussar, the ethicists say that your face is a Reshut HaRabim. Your face has the status of public property. You walk around with a scowl, you're going to bring down the mood of everyone that you encounter. You walk around with a smile, you bring up everyone else around you. And, when I'm suffering, the world has to suffer. The world suffers along with me. That's not how it is meant to be. And even though I'm going through some difficulty, I don't then go and dump it onto others and make them pay the price for whatever it is that I'm personally going through. Of course, I might decide not to be so open and laughing if I'm going through a lot, but I don't impose that on others. But it goes a little bit deeper than that. And that is something that the Nesiva Shalom, the Slon of a Rebbe, explains very, very beautifully. And that is that, and also if you noticed back on page 108, when it said that he came to cry, to eulogize Sarah, v'liv kota, back on page 106, the third line, in our Chumash and in the Torah itself, the word v'liv kota is written, one of the letters is smaller than all the others. There's a small kaf over there. So on the word that he was there and crying, we say that we minimize his crying. And the Medrash tells a story as follows. The Medrash tells, right, the event that immediately preceded the death of Sarah was the Akedat Yitzchak, was the binding of Isaac. And Rashi brings that someone came and was telling Sarah the story. Abraham, your husband, took your son Isaac and took him up to a mountain, right? And he was there to offer him as a sacrifice to God. What? Right? And he's telling the whole story and was just about to get to the point where, and then the angel from heaven said, don't, that's not what I want, right? And everyone is helping you well, just about to get to that point where Parsha Nishmata, her neshama flew out. And therefore, according to this Medrash, right, Ramban says, according to Pshat, this probably took place years later. According to the Medrash, this happened right afterwards. And therefore, it seemed that the cause of Sarah's death was the Akedah. If only I hadn't done that, then she wouldn't have heard the story. She wouldn't have died from shock, from fear, for whatever it is. And he explains, actually part of the davening, the prayers that we say in the evening prayers, is V'haser Satan milfanenu ume'acharenu. Remove the adversary from before us and from behind us. And we have challenges in doing something. That's the adversary, the Satan that's there before us. And then another challenge we often have is after having done it, how do I feel about it now? Do I regret having done it or not? So when the adversary, the Satan, was not able to stop Avram from doing the Akedah, then his tactics changed and said, well, let's have him regret it. And let's engineer it that it looks like hearing about the Akedah, that is what killed Sarah. That is what caused the death of his beloved wife. And therefore, we couldn't get him to stop it. Let's at least get him to regret having done it. The Gemara Kedusha, the Talmud teaches that any good thing that a person has done, that is in the books, that cannot be taken away from the person unless one regrets it. If one regrets it the same way that we have the concept of teshuvah, of repentance, of returning, and if we regret if we regret having done something that we shouldn't have done, if it's against a person, we ask them for forgiveness and we regret and we accept not to do it in the future. So that regret can erase that act. Well, there's always this balance. And so to a good act, a regret can cause it to be erased. And therefore, the adversary, the Sodom, is trying to get Avram to regret it. But Avram understood, and this is an important concept, again, coming back to what we began with the Chayei Sarah, with life and death, that a person's time on earth is set. As long as we don't do anything, we learned last night, Kathy, right, and Kamala, right? As long as we don't do anything that is reckless, then when our time comes, our time comes. And it might appear that this is what caused it, or that's what caused it. But that is not what caused it. That is the means through which it came about. But it was meant to come about at that point. So Abraham passed this test in that, hey Ken, good morning, in that he was not going to think that, oh, it was the story that killed Sarah. And had she not heard that, had I not done that, or had the person, why did that person go and tell her the story? Or why didn't that person go and say quickly, everything's okay, but let me tell, right? All of that is fanciful on our part, but does not make the difference. That's not what makes the difference. That's the wrong one. That's not a chumash. That one's a chumash. That's a treyasa. Yeah, that does not make the difference. And Avram passed this test and understood that this was the Chayei Sarah. Go back to that first verse again. And it was the life of Sarah was 100 years, 20 years, 7 years. Those were the years of the life of Sarah. Why do we have that repetition? Those were the years of the life of Sarah. Avram understood that is how long she was meant to live. And it was not the Akedah, it was not the storyteller, it was not the story, it was not the shock. That's not what caused her to die prematurely. But that was her time. I mentioned this before, something that when you hear about a person who passed away, certainly a person passes away at an early age or an earlier stage, right? Our first reaction is, oh, horrible, terrible. And I've trained myself to shy away from using that expression. Horrible or terrible is I'm judging God, what he has done, right? And God said it's time for the person to come back home, to come back to their source, to come back to the spiritual realm. So instead of saying horrible, terrible, right, which is judging God on it, I use terms like, oh, tragic, heartbreaking, right, which is not passing judgment on what was done, but describing how we down here feel, right? How we experience it. And that is, and we are supposed to, we discussed this, I think, last week, when Avraham is going to intercede on behalf of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? So God invites Avraham's intervening, Avram's prayers. So why does God want Avram's prayers? Why do our prayers make any difference at all? God knows we're not adding anything to the story. Yes, but God wants us to see the world through human eyes and not through godly eyes. And through human eyes, it is tragic. It is heartbreaking. And if it's tragic and heartbreaking, so then we feel the need, which is positive, to do whatever we can do to help comfort those people, to help those people who are suffering from this tragic, heartbreaking loss. Right? Rabbi Sachs says very, very beautifully, the question, why does bad things happen to good people? We don't want to know the answer. If we knew the answer, we wouldn't try to help. Right? Why did this terrible thing happen to this person? Oh, why did this happen to this person? Oh, that's why it happened. Oh, okay. All right. Back to my solitaire on my computer. Everything's fine. Now I understand why it happened. Right? But because we don't know why, therefore we agonize over it, and therefore we try to make this world a better place. We try to help that person in whatever manner that we can. Okay. Good. So that's why there is this small Kaf, right? Also the order. Avram came to eulogize Sarah and to cry. Typically, what is the order of events? First one cries, and then one eulogizes. But he eulogized, and then he cried, and it was a minimized crying because he was not crying over the tragedy, the tragic, untimely death, because he didn't believe it was untimely. He was crying over the personal loss that he experienced, and certainly tears when we lose someone is very, very appropriate, right? But understanding that this is a stage in each of our existence gives us the strength not to gouge ourselves, not to go over the top. Okay. The next episode is, if you turn to page 108, chapter 24, Avraham is on an age. He was close to losing Isaac, and he realizes, okay, we got to get a wife for Isaac. So what does he do? He calls now Isaac was holy to the point that he cannot leave the land of Israel. But Avram wanted to send to his family, not from the Canaanites around him who were idolaters. He wanted someone from his family, and therefore he calls in Eliezer, his servant, page 110. And I will have you, and he has him swear by the name of God, the God of the heavens, the God of the earth, that he will not take a wife, livni for my son, from the daughters of Canaan, Ki el artsi ve'el moladati telech. Right? You should go back to my land where I came from, to my birthplace, and there you will take a wife for my son Yitzchak, for my son Isaac. Okay? So he sends him out, and then what happens? He swears he'll do that. He takes, verse 10, he takes the camels, and he goes to the city of Nahor. And then he has, verse 11, he has the camels kneeling down outside the city by a well of water. That's when the water drawers are going out. And he says, verse 12, Hashem, the God of my master Abraham, Hakrein el fanai hayom, come before me today and do chesed with my master Abraham. I'm standing by this well of water, and the daughters of the city are coming out to draw water. And it will be that the young maiden, that I will say to her, can you please tilt your pitcher and let me drink? And her response will be, you drink, and also to your camels I will give to drink. That is the one who will be for your servant Isaac, page 112. And then I know you've done chesed with my master. And it was, verse 15, he just had finished offering that prayer, and out comes a girl, who later we find out her name is Rivka, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Achi Avram. This is all Avram's extended family. And the Kadal Shechma, and the jug is on her shoulder, and she was very beautiful, and she went down to fill the water, and the servant ran, Eliezer ran to her, the Eved ran to her, and said, please give me some water from your pitcher. Now keep in mind, he's a big, capable, strong man, and she's a little girl, right? Nara, a young girl, right? She needs him to draw the water, right? An appropriate response would be, I think you're a bit stronger than I. Why don't you help yourself? But a person who wanted to do chesed, right, sees in a chesed acts of kindness, sees an opportunity and seizes that opportunity. So what does she say? She says, drink, right? And she gave him to drink. And when he finished drinking, she said, and also for your camels, I will draw until they have finished drinking. And she did that. She filled up the trough. And the man is wondering, wow, is this the right one or not? And when the camels all finished drinking, he knew this is the right one. He saw this chesed. What did he do? He took the jewelry, verse 22, and he put it onto her. He gave it to her. And then 23, he said, and whose daughter are you? And she said, and is there a place that I can come stay in the house of your father? And she said, I am the daughter of Bethuel, etc., etc. And yes, there's place for you to come stay with us. And he bowed down and he thanked God and said, thank God, the God of my family, who has not deserted his chesed, his kindness and his truth, page 114. And here he has led me to the house of my master's brother, right? Everything is all set. Beautiful. She runs home now and tells her mother the whole story. She had a brother by the name of Lavan who comes out and he sees all the jewelry, hears the whole story, and he says, come in, we'll come back to Lavan. We'll come back to Lavan soon. He comes to the house and he retells the story, right? And uncharacteristically, in the Torah, where a single letter or word can teach us mounds of teachings, be it halacha, Jewish law, or other things, here the entire story is repeated. And he says, well, let me tell you what happened. My father, my master, Avram, had me swear, and then I came and I offered the prayer, and then Rivka came out, right? And she did all this, and therefore this is from God, and therefore, right? And Rivka ends up marrying Yitzchak. What is strange, though, and this is on Aleph Beta, right? Not Rabbi Foreman, but one of the other authors there points out something that I thought was very, very meaningful and very brilliant. In the retelling of this story, there are certain nuanced differences of how it happened and how Eliezer retells the story to them. So let's go through 4 of these differences. Go back to page 110. When Avraham, verse 4, when Avraham has him swear that you will not take from the daughters of Canaanite, but rather El Artsi, to my land, the El Moladati, and to my birthplace you will go. And we'll go up and back. On page 114, verse 38, when Eliezer is now telling this story to them, verse 37, and my master had me take an oath, saying, do not take a wife from my son from the doors of the Canaanites in whose land I dwell, unless you go to my father's house, the El Mishpachti, and to my family, V'lakachti isha livni, and take a wife from my son. What is he adding over here that we didn't have originally? Originally it was to my land and my birthplace. Over here, what is he adding? Family. So when he retells the story, he says, I had to go to the family. Okay, let's go back to page 110. When he is offering his prayer, verse 12, Pasuk Yud Bet. He said, God, the God of my master Avram, come before me today and do chesed, kindness, with my master Avram. And then he gives that whole prayer. I'll go by the well. The girl that I asked for water, she says, for you and for your camels. That's how it happened. When he retells the story, page 116, verse 42. I came now to the well. And I said, Hashem, God, the God of Master Avram, if you will send success to my path that I'm going on, behold, I'm going by the well, etc., etc., etc. What did he leave out over here? Originally, he said, do chesed with my master Avram. Over here, the word chesed is left out. If you will send success to that which I'm about to do. Okay, Let's go back again, page 112. Let's look at the order of events. Looking at page 112, verse 21, right? Or let's look at 20. She quickly gave to drink to him and to all the camels. 22, and it was when the camels finished drinking, he took the jewelry and, right? Vayomer, 23, bat mi'at. Right? So it seems 22, he gave her the jewelry. 23, he said, and whose daughter are you? Please tell me. Now that would seem to be a little bit reckless. You give the jewelry and then you ask. When he retells the story, page 116, Pasuk Mem Zayin, verse 47, she gave to drink and everything and the camels in 46, and I asked her, whose daughter are you? And she said, I'm the daughter of Betuel, etc., etc. And then I placed the jewelry on her hands. So when he retells the story, first he asks, who's the family? And only then does he give her the jewelry. Lastly, back to page 114, verse 27. When he finishes, when it actually happened, when he sees he's got the right person, he thanks God. And he says, verse 27, Baruch Hashem, blessed is God, the God of my master Avram, Asher lo azav chazdo va'amito, who has not withheld his kindness and his truth from my master. He has led me to the house of my master of Abraham's family. So God has not withheld the chesed, the kindness, and the truth. When he's retelling the story, page 116, verse 48, how does he retell it? Ve'ekod, and I bowed down, and I prostrated myself, Hashem, to God. Vavarech, and I blessed the God, Hashem, the God of my master Avram, who led me on the derech, on the path of truth, to take a daughter of my master's family as a wife. Here he mentions emet. What does he leave out? Chesed. He leaves out the kindness. So it seems, as they point out, that Eliezer saw something here at the house that made him realize he's got to adjust this story. He's got to adjust it for the audience. What is it that he saw? So go back to page 114. After, when it's actually happening, we hear that she has a brother, Lavan, verse 29, who runs out to the to the well there, the fountain there. And he sees all of the jewelry, and he hears the words of Rivka, and he comes to the man standing there, verse 31, and he says, come, Baruch Hashem, come, you blessed one of God. Lama tamod b'chutz, why should you stand outside? Verse 31, Vanochi paniti abayit, I've cleaned out the house, plenty of room for you. Umakom lagmalim, and there's place there for the camels. Very, very chesed, incredible kindness, hospitality. Come, you, all of everybody, all the camels, come, come, come. Vayavo ha'ish habaita. So the man, who's the man? The man is Eliezer, comes to the house. Vayifatach hagmalim. And he unmuzzles the camels. And he gives teven, straw. He starts feeding the camels. Umayim, and water. Lirchotz raglav, to wash his feet. V'ragleha nashim asher ito, and all those who are there with him. Who's doing all of this? We have what's called a hanging pronoun over here, and he. So Ramban says, even though it says the man Eliezer came to the house, who did all those acts? That's what Lavan did. But another way of looking at it is, right? Vayavo ha'ish habaita, the man came to the house. So who is if we're going to say he, who are we referring to? The Ish, Eliezer. And all of a sudden, he needed to unmuzzle the camels. He needed to feed them. He needed to start bringing water and start washing the legs of those who were traveling with him. Meaning, he saw that this is a home where they represent, they project chesed, kindness, hospitality, but that's not what they do.
Didn't they clean up?
Yeah, that the Rashi brings that. Yes, the idolatry.
Yeah.
But the point here is this is a home that acts as if they are such balei chesed, but in fact, they are the antithesis of that. And that, he understood, speaks volumes about Rivka. Because she was brought up in such an environment, and yet that test, which showed this unbridled love for kindness, so she was not that. She was the shining example of kindness. And that's why he needed to make all of these changes. What was important to them was family and wealth. Chesed, kindness, was something that they might talk about. They might hang up a lot of plaques that they might have had in their dining room, but that's not what they were truly about in any way, shape, or form. And those are the changes, right? The first change was Avram. He didn't mention go to the house of my family, but to them, family is all that matters. He mentioned family. And his prayer was, God, do chesed, do kindness for Avram. Over here, he left out, right? God fulfilled the mission of Avram. The order of, did he first give the jewelry and then ask, or did he ask and then give the jewelry? If it's all about family, he told them, I asked and then I gave the jewelry. But in fact, what he was concerned about was chesed and his tefillah. And when he saw this incredible chesed on the part of Rivka, she was the one. He didn't even have to ask about the family. And lastly, in his thanks to God, he said, thank you, God, for not withholding the chesed and the emet, the kindness and the truth. When he retells the story, he thanks God he says he thanked God for not withholding the truth. Chesed, he knew, was not going to work for them, right? You have to package the message for the audience. And they were not interested in hearing about chesed. But he saw that Rebecca was kulo chesed, was all on full force, not from concentrate, not diluted. She was pure chesed, and therefore she was the one for Avram's family. Keep in mind, Avram's family was bringing this chesed, this teaching to the world in a very hostile world. And therefore, he needed someone, and Rivka was the perfect one, who in this hostile environment was the rose amongst the thorns, was the one who came out with this pure chesed approach in life. And therefore, she would be the one who would carry on the continuity of Avram, of Abraham's teachings, by being the wife of Isaac, of Yitzchak. And in fact, when she does come back there and enters the tent, it says that it became once again the tent of Sarah, that she was that continuity. And right, sometimes we're surrounded by a lot of things which seem to be the antithesis of what we are, what we're meant to be. And the nisayon, the challenge, we had Abraham's tests and challenges, our nisayon is to be who we are and to be true to who we are, even when all around us there is other approaches and very different behaviors, to be true to who we are. Okay, my friends. Yes, Ruti.
Why does it mention the name of the? It says all the time Eved, but it never said Eliezer.
Yeah. So it's very interesting, right? Right. It's interesting. It's Eved, 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 right? And then once he gets there, right? Then take a look on page 12, page 112. Sorry, right? The Eved, verse 17, ran to her and asked for some water. And what does she say? She says, Shetei Adoni, drink my master, right? And then she serves him royally. What happened now? Chaf Aleph, Va'ish, right? And now the man is wondering. So it was Eved, Eved, Eved. She calls him Adoni, my master. And now how does the Torah refer to him? And the man is wondering, right? And then again, 22, Vayikach Ha'ish, the man took all the jewelry and gave it to her and asked her, who are you the daughter of, right? And etc., etc. And then page 114, and the man bowed down to Hashem and thanked Hashem. She then ran to her family and told, Lavan comes running out, right? And then when he sees all this, right? Again, in 30, the man, he came to the man and he stood there and he said, come, blessed in the name of God. At 32, and the man came to the house, right? And then 33, it was all placed before him, and he said, Lo ochal, I will not eat. Adam dibarti, until I speak. They said, speak. Vayomar, and he said, Eved, Abraham Anochi. So interesting how the names or the descriptive terms keep changing over here, right? So I'll come to you. It's not exactly what you asked, Rudy. I'll come to that in a minute, right? But I think we don't mention Eliezer because he was there serving not as Eliezer. He was there serving in the capacity of Abraham's servant. And he was not there, right? We heard earlier Rashi bring that he was thinking, well, I've got a daughter, but he was there not representing himself. He was there representing Abraham. What we do see over here is that the way that we refer to someone, that can completely change the person's view of themselves, how they view themselves. And he was Eved, Eved, Eved. But once he got to this point, he needed to get back to, I am here not as Eliezer. I am here not as an Ish. I am here on a mission of Avraham on behalf of Yitzchak. So perhaps the reason that Eliezer, the name is never mentioned, because he was not coming there as Eliezer. He was coming there on this mission of Avram in order to what would actually be building the children of the nation of Israel, right? Laying the foundation of who would the wife be for Yitzchak. Okay, my friends, we'll call it over here. Yasher koach, everybody. Everybody online, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Shavua Tov, a good week, everybody. There was a lot of really good pastries that I can't offer you online. I apologize. Those who want to come, I know you might be on diets, but there's also some healthy stuff. So please, in the future, please do try when you can to come in person.
Thank you very much.
Everybody. Be well, everybody.